Right, hello, welcome back to the channel. It is Aliar on Cars, and today I'm going to run through all the common problems that the Saab 9-3 has. Of course, obviously I have the Saab 9-3 with me. I'm going to run through kind of all the common problems. Auto Autopsy did do one of these, I believe, on the new Gen 9-3 petrols. I'm going to run through the diesels, specifically the Z19DTH, which is the 1.9 diesel single turbo 16 valve. I'm going to run through that since I've owned many of them, and I think pretty much, other than the TTID, they are the most common diesel you can get. So let's get straight into it. Right, so here she is. Cleaned her a few days ago, looking very well in the nice weather we've got today, which is definitely a rarity. So first and foremost, let's get straight into this. So this is essentially going to be a buyer's guide for the new Gen 9-3. I think it's applicable from pretty much 2004 up to 2010. Anything obviously with the single turbo. Common problems can also include petrol models, twin turbo diesel models, the V6s, since I'll be talking about the engine, the gearboxes, bodies, subframes and electricals and other bits and bobs, whatever comes to mind. This is pretty much unscripted. I'm going to just go along and then just say what I know can be a problem on these. So just for context, obviously, of course, this is diesel. Diesels were obviously very popular in the UK and in Europe, especially around this time, early 2000s. I know this is a 2010. Especially around the 2000s, since there was a lot of tax incentives, they were lower on CO2 and all this and all that stuff, a lot before the kind of diesel scandal thing that went on afterwards, which in all fairness isn't really that bad. I think it's quite exaggerated, but I think that's a topic for another video. But anyway, let's get straight into this. Diesels suffer with swirl flaps. They did get revised in 2009. 09 plate onwards, you're kind of onto a decent one. Swirl flaps did get revised, but I've removed them on this because it's just one less thing to worry about. You can remove them, remove the rod, remove the little flaps, keep the motor in place, put the bungs in. You can get either a welded manifold off someone, or you can get the 2-litre CDTI intake manifold, since it's essentially the same piece from the Insignia or an Alfa Romeo. Put that on. Happy as Larry, they're usually okay with them. EGRs can be a problem. It was a problem on this. So you have an elbow that comes out the manifold, there's a split. That happened actually on my older automatic 9.3 diesel. There was a split on the EGR on that elbow, and it can cause a whole host of problems. Not the fact that obviously it stinks when you're running the car, the fact it obviously clogs up the EGR cooler, clogs up the valve, clogs up the intake, and then just causes a whole host of problems then from then onwards. Valve, which is actually what went on this manual version, this actual car. This one went probably a few weeks after I actually bought the car. Went for a run, realised it wouldn't boost under 2000 RPM from time to time, and then it just wouldn't boost under 2000 RPM. Valve sticks open, they are electric, you can change them, they are a little bit expensive, but I guess it's part and parcel of having a Euro 5 diesel. This one's Euro 5. DPFs are obviously another thing as well. So DPFs sit underneath on the cars on these, which is really handy, because compared to newer ones where they sit in the engine bay and it's an absolute bark to get to and service, you can service the DPFs underneath on these, which is quite nice. Exhaust flexes are another one as well. They can go, just wear and tear, 15 years old, they can go. And same with DPFs as well. They are actually a serviceable item. They do go at this age, or at set mileage, or how many regenerations we're coming up to it. This is obviously 15 years old. This is one of the youngest out there, so I guarantee you'll at least be looking at something a little bit older. So it probably more than likely, if it hasn't had a DPF replaced or flushed, it's probably going to need it soon. My bonnet is actually stuck shut, to be honest. I do actually need to get around to sorting that, hence why I can't pop it. More things that do go wrong with these 1.9s is the water pipes go at the front, they can corrode. The 9.5 doesn't suffer with this, Alfa Romeos don't suffer with this, but for some strange reason they decided on the 9.3, on the Vectra, and possibly Astras as well. They have pipes that run along the front, they can corrode. I've actually put stainless steel ones on mine, because that way I don't have to worry about them rotting. There's also the water pumps, cam belt and water pumps. They need to be changed every 60,000 miles every 5 years. They need to be changed. With Gates ones, don't use any other brand, because the other branded ones are quite bad from what I've heard and what I've seen on forums. They don't hold up as well as what the Gates ones do. Do not get a Dayco one, get a Gates one whenever you can. Alternators can go as well. They can shed pulleys because the pulleys themselves actually internally, the alternators internally fail physically, and they can cause problems. You can throw alternator belts off and all sorts, and even to a point of seeing one where the actual pulley collapsed and was actually rubbing on the alternator itself, grinding away. There's also intake pipes what run along next to the battery. They can split as well. Obviously you'd notice on road test, obviously of course you'd at least notice some of these things, at least on road test. A lot of these defects, what actually happen, do actually flag up an engine warning light, so being obviously the DPF, EGR. Drive them cold and then get them up to temperature on your road test as well. Obviously then it will flag up and obviously show the faults. Another thing what goes on these is thermostats as well. So my thermostat's actually knackered. It does need changing. I do actually have a replacement, but I'm hoping to do it in tandem with my cam belt and water pump. Thermostats do go. Symptoms is the fact they don't warm up. Obviously now the weather is very nice, it's very warm now. It does at least get up to temperature, but when it's cold and probably when you're on the motorway, or especially when you're doing town driving, intercity work, it does not warm up whatsoever. And last but not least, dual mass flywheel failure. It had a second-hand flywheel thrown on it before I bought the car. I knackered that flywheel, so then I had a new clutch and flywheel put on it, courtesy of RTJ Autos. Well, you may think possibly the fact that, you know, that may be a considerable list for the diesel. Bearing in mind the fact, again, as mentioned, this diesel actually started out late 90s somewhat, was modified, then it went into the Saabs around 2004-ish, and this actual example is now 15 years old. So in terms of a modern diesel, I'd definitely put it up there and say it's got to be one of the best 4-cylinder 21st century diesels there is, common rail ones anyway, definitely for sure. And you compare it to other ones, all I know is these 1.9s, being, in all honesty, I haven't worked on many other common rail 4-cylinder diesels, but for these, in terms of working room and basically doing jobs on them, they're absolutely fantastic. I honestly can't complain. So on to other parts of the car. Electrical gremlins, we might as well get them out of the way. Alarms can be a problem with these. The electrics inside the modules can die. It thinks that the door's open while the alarm's armed, and then it'll trip the alarm. You can get them programmed out. There are some people that do this. That's one of the electrical faults. SIM modules can be a problem, but it's very, very rare. Ignition switches can also be a problem, but essentially they just need cleaning out. It's due to the nature of the location of where they are in the car. They're very, very rare, few and far between. I've noticed instrument clusters can have like little failures, such as like little LEDs going out, and the beep of what's inside the speaker, what makes the noises for the indicators and stuff, they can go a little bit funny. But in terms of electrics, as to mention, these cars, bearing in mind the fact that they were kind of rushed and under a strict budget from General Motors, they've done surprisingly well. There aren't too many electrical problems really to complain of, to be honest. They're generally very, very reliable. The thing to now watch out for, which I've noticed on 2 convertibles, including a friend's convertible, is the fact that the wiper linkages can go. They essentially pop, and it's along the passenger wiper. What actually works, where it pops the ball joint, the driver's one no longer works. Subframes are one as well, front and rear subframes. Mine were actually advised. New subframes, I don't know if they're hard to get hold of. I know there was a time when they were, but front and rear subframes can be a problem. It's probably best off putting some money aside to at least get the underside of the car undersealed. The bodies and stuff do quite well. There have been complaints as well with the fact that later cars, because of the fact that they were rushed into production and to be sold, the fact that they didn't get the same under treatment as what the early ones did. I've been underneath the car a few times and it looks decent enough. It's just mainly more subframes and the fact that they've now been advised. So the automatic gearbox in these I shared with Volvo, they shared with PSA, the Ace in one, a gearbox made by Toyota. They're pretty much in everything going, to be honest, around this era. 6-speed automatic, obviously not in this particular car, so this one's a manual, but I did have it obviously in my Auto 9-3. They are not lifetime fluid, and for anyone who's managed to stumble across this channel who has a Volvo, a Citroen, probably mainly a Volvo, to be honest, because in the midst of when I wanted to replace my first 9-3, when I was kind of having problems with it and I wanted an estate car, a replacement estate car, I was actually quoted off a Volvo specialist, and I can't remember which one it was, but they said, look, we're a Volvo specialist and these gearboxes are sealed for life. Absolute rubbish. Ignore them and ignore whoever else says the fact that they're sealed for life. That is absolutely rubbish. Even Saab says in the owner's manual the fact that them gearboxes should be serviced every 50 to 70,000 miles. They're very, very reliable and they run for pretty much forever when you do service them. No oil is serviced for life or for a lifetime of the unit it's in, absolute rubbish. Get them serviced. Saab says every 50 to 70,000 miles. Obviously, if you're towing or obviously driving the car quite hard, obviously you'd want to at least do that sooner since the oil will break down more. The manual gearboxes as well are no exception as well. I can't remember if Saab actually has a specified service interval for them. They do need changing though. The gearbox oil does need changing. It is on the forums and stuff. If you do have a notchy gear change, the oil is probably from factory, probably still in there, roaming around. And they were overfilled from factory as well with 3 litres. I believe they're happy around 2.2 to 2.5 litres of oil. That's kind of like revised what General Motors did. And that's where the level or the sort of max of the actual gearbox oil is. Done gearboxes and notchiness and gear changes. On the manuals, it affects when you're changing gear, it can be a little bit notchy, it can be a little bit... I struggle sometimes going into third when the car is cold. That's not a gearbox fault, it's actually to do with the selector turret, which sits on and in the box. There's a bush what goes, and obviously with that bush going, obviously, like, say for example, like when I'm in 5th or 6th gear and I put it into neutral, it does not kick back, the gear stick does not kick back. That's because of that bush as well. There are people who offer poly bushes, which is definitely something I need to do on this. They offer them, that fixes it. Actually, just one thing to remember as well, because this is a TID, people may point out, obviously this has got split exhausts. My TID exhaust, as you know, well, for anyone who's a Saab owner or knows Saabs, the TID has essentially what would be a box and then just 2 exhaust tips here. They don't have the split. The split, what I've got on here comes from the TTID. Essentially, I had a massive hole in my back box, and I believe it was ready for falling off. That's one thing that is common with TIDs. If they haven't had a new rear end section of the exhaust, they are very prone for falling off. This did actually happen with my automatic. I don't suppose if the chap of the X5, the early 2000s X5 is watching this, probably not. But the guy who came to rescue me, like probably 2 years ago now, around December, shout out to him. Because my actual back box had fell off and actually managed to wedge itself, so I couldn't drive it. Managed to mount the curb, and then he literally came up out of nowhere, managed to jack the car up, managed to rip the back box off and then drive home. And I was about 100 miles away from home, so shout out to the man in the BMW X5. And also as well, actually, the TTIDs where the Y is, where it comes out into 2 exhausts at the back, the Y section, when obviously these do DPF regenerations, which bumps the exhaust temperature up to about 500 degrees, and then obviously the fact of rainwater, salt and all other things, it can put a hole in the exhaust at the Y bend. So that's one thing you do want to look out for, actually, as a matter of fact. That's obviously more TTID related rather than CID related, but it's at least relevant, at least somewhat, to this. Power steering can go on these, but again, that's part and parcel of the fact that the fluid's probably original. I believe it's original on this as well, and obviously this is 15 years old, so having a rack what goes, it is expensive as well to change, but part and the parcel of getting an old car. I could go into and mention ball joints and lower control arms and stuff like what I've had to change on this, but again, that's just more road condition and the fact you can't really pin that up against the car or say it's a common issue, because it affects all cars and all vehicles. So blower motors are another thing as well, actually. While I must mention, I've actually had to change my blower motor, very common on the new Gen 9-3s. And the reason why the blower motors go is because there's actually a filter under here and there's a seal behind it. I'm not sure if I've changed it on this one, but you need to change the seal. So essentially, well, if I could pop my bonnet, there is essentially a filter that runs along here for the cabin filter. There's 2 little sort of clips, undo them, and then you can actually see behind there's like other tabs what kind of keep the plastic up to the firewall, where there's a cutout. The seal which sits behind that between the firewall and the actual plastic housing for the filter, that can go. And if you're wondering the reason why you may have a puddle one morning on your passenger side footwell on your Saab 9-3, that's the reason why. Honestly, I bought the seal from RTJ Autos from eBay, fast delivery, something like £8 or something like that. Throw it on, literally a flathead, half an hour of your time, soapy water, clean it off, put the new seal on, snip it to size, and then that's that problem sorted. But other than that, bear in mind the fact that these were basically underfunded from the parent company, kind of rushed out. Certain features on this, if you've heard of eSID, you probably might not have done, but eSID is essentially a little module you can plug in for this. They were things with what was supposed to be released with the car, but they weren't, especially in facelift guys. So bearing in mind the fact that these were, as mentioned, underfunded, kind of rushed out, not as much as the new Gen 9-5, they're holding quite well. I've not owned other estate vehicles really, or owned them long enough to at least cast my opinion, but the new Gen 9-3 for me, that's the reason why I still run one. That's why I still tow with it. That's why it still does all my errands. Obviously there are probably other cars which may fetch me more reliable, but reliability is kind of part and parcel. That's basically kind of like a tot-up of the new Gen 9-3 in terms of like a buyer's guide in terms of things to look out for. There probably are a few other things I may have missed off the list, but these are kind of like the most common ones which spring to mind. A lot of the things what I've actually mentioned are actually things I've actually come across myself as well. But as obviously again to mention the fact that bear in mind the fact that these cars are now 15 years old, at least, they're honestly not doing too bad. There's a reason why I myself run my 9-3. I'm happy running my 9-3. It does pretty much everything. I throw everything at it. And there's the reason why so many of them are still on the roads today, especially in the UK. There are loads and loads of 9-3s. But also having that being said, there's loads of bad example 9-3s out there from people who have neglected them and who haven't decided to do preventive maintenance and look after them. So yeah, let me know what you think. Drop a comment down below, and thanks for watching. See you for the next one.